It was beyond my imagination to see a fire that ferocious burning in the heart of the Okefenokee.
Big flames, I mean flames over the treetops. Basically, the world was on fire out there.
My name is George Constantino, and I'm the refuge manager of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, which means that I'm responsible for all the activities and all the programs on this National Wildlife Refuge.
I'm Howard McCullough. I'm a forestry technician here at Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, and I've been here for the past 23 years.
I'm Chip Campbell. I'm the owner of Okefenokee Adventures with my wife Joy. We're the visitor services contractor here at Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge.
We were at one of the most severe and long-term drought periods that we had seen in decades.
It was so dry that George Constantino, the refuge manager, and myself actually walked up one of the dried down canoe trails. There was no water in the run at all.
It was like the yellow brick road. We walked all the way to Craven's Hammock, we walked all the way back, we never got our feet wet. And at that point, it dawned on me, this really is a drought.
We've gotten to the point already that when we were taking people out on tours, we weren't talking about if a fire starts, we were saying when a fire starts.
The fire actually got started way before our typical fire season.
The initial fire was actually did not start on the refuge. It started about 12 miles northwest of the refuge on private property.
When high winds out of the northwest popped a power line, which fell down into a just tender, dry power line right away.
This wasn't the only fire. There had been a number of fires all around to the north of us that the Georgia Forestry Commission had been fighting. I mean, they had actually been working extremely hard, almost all hands out on a number of other fires that were very hard to control when the Sweat Farm Road fire started. And that fire got up and ran so fast that even our Type 1 teams that were on the time said, this surpasses anything we've seen in our fire career.
Within a couple of days, it was 1,200 acres and growing. I mean, just by leaps and bounds, it was growing.
The conditions were such that it was going to be hard to control. I mean, Georgia, from the initial start of the fire, all they could do was just kind of follow up the flanks, the two edges of the fire. They couldn't get out in front of it and do much because it was just spotting so far out ahead of itself.
It came down out of the northwest, and it came down and it caught came across the swamp, and it began to creep all along this eastern edge, and they were holding it as much as they could in the swamp along the swamp's edge break while it continued to creep down our way.
At its peak, we had 3 different Type 1 fire teams fighting it from different angles.
And at one point, I mean, it looked like a mushroom cloud right out beyond those pine trees, right out off the back of our parking lot. It was just, the whole sky was full of it. By the time it was over, we had seen flames over treetops all around us. I mean, it was immediately on top of us.
It tended to slow down, which was good because that gave us time to start building up our fire response. The fire break is basically taking a running strip of land and removing the vegetation to the point that it won't burn. It'll stop a fire. So we may just do that by mowing, but many times we'll run a light harrow just to scur up the surface.
We were fortunate it didn't sweep on up and burn this visitor services area. It didn't burn our buildings, it didn't burn the visitor center here, but it got all around us. By the time it was done, it had burned most of the landscape between Waycross, Georgia and Lake City, Florida.
Well, it takes what we call a season-ending event. We have to have enough rain to actually put the fire out.
The grass all around us, it never has been greener than it was, later on that summer after the rainfall.
In fact, there's a stimulative factor. That fire goes through one of our native forest. It takes out a lot of fuels, it brings back a lot of grasses, it actually sets back invading species that are coming into the wetlands and opens them back up, and it's just kind of resets this cycle that the landscape's going to go through.
The Okefenokee swamp needs fire to maintain itself as a swampy ecosystem. And in that sense, it was a big help.